Series thanks to Jesse Sensabar right over there. We're going to start out the night with some amazing original psychedelic violin music by Barry Smith. Here it is.
Oh, no, yeah.
publisher M.L. Liebler in Detroit was nice enough after he made his money back to allow us to put all the money from the book sales into the tour. So we've been going strong now for 7 months, and everywhere that we go in Arizona, plus Las Vegas, we were lucky enough to have Barry, who's Brian's older brother, join us for his amazing violin music. And wherever he can't join us, we join up with local musicians or poets, sometimes other fiction writers, and we always try to bring together a really interesting crowd. This is an amazing book. It's actually my favorite book in the last 2 decades, which is why I wanted to bring it to light and help you guys find it. It's a collection of 10 linked narratives that center on a character, Julian Grayling's life over 30 years. And so it was perfect for film because it's a super atmospheric book. Brian's really good at depicting really gritty scenes in really lyric, beautiful ways. And so as filmmakers, people were really captivated by it. And it started as 30 to 60 second short films that you can see on spentsaints.com. And it was 11 minutes of film originally across 11 different directors. And then it got turned into a web series. So you can only see the web series right now at our live readings. And we're going to show 2 of them tonight. They're about 8 minutes long. The first one is Graham's. And in the scheme of things, it's basically in the middle of this book, middle of Julian's life. And then the last one is the last time. It's Ghosts and Fireflies. It's the last story in the book. So I'm going to play them back to back, so you can check them out. Thank you so much.
This is my book, Spent Saints, and we have some copies for sale because I'm nothing if not a huckster or huckster. You know, Maggie gets paid to say all that stuff that she said. So you guys know. So I'm sticking to live readings are funny. We've been touring this book around the country, and I've found that the funnest stuff to read is the stuff that involves drugs and alcoholism and drug dealers, and for some reason it's just more fun to read. So I'm going to read a little passage from one of the stories that involves some of that stuff, but I'm going to say as a disclaimer that I try my best to avoid drug porn and alcohol porn because it's just so overdone and lit, in my opinion, in many ways, so it has to be done with a sort of a gentle, whatever. Okay, here we go. The story takes place in a little suburb of Phoenix called Sunny Slope. I climbed into the passenger seat and Tinkles lifted the pint of Southern Comfort from between his legs and offered me a shot. Took a good chug, handed it back, and twisted an air conditioning vent in my direction. Pretty much all we needed to say to each other. Tinkles wheeled the old Corolla back out onto my street and turned west on Van Buren. We took it easy through downtown, headed north on 7th Avenue, and rolled toward Sunny Slope. It was a dark burb that rises up a sun-crusted hill. There were a few cars out and butter-colored streetlights fanned across the windshield. Tinkles flipped the car stereo onto Cher's Believe and turned it up. I reached out and turned it down. Blown, distorted speaker, terrible song. My ears just didn't want it. Is Jesus going to be there, I asked. Tinkles nodded and flicked the volume back up. It was near midnight and Tinkles arrived 2 hours late. See, waiting to score crystal was madness. All you do is fret and pace. You count minutes and seconds. You count the books on your shelves and the stars in the sky and the zits on your face and how many craps you took that week. You count everything again and again and again. And the very first tweaker pathology you learn is that they are never on time. But you wait, you count every time, fucking madness. Before we got to Sunny Slope, we swung by a Circle K and picked up a 40 of King Cobra for me and a couple of quarts of Bud for Tinkles and Jesus. I never showed up without a bottle for the host. I was a class act. I'd met Jesus once. It was nighttime and he was leaning against a tree. He talked at me for 2 hours in that way that people do when they're used to being the only ones talking. It was more of a sermon involving his missing son and Phoenix's white pride underground and the New Testament's immortal worms of hell and the agony of doing crystal meth in prison because it puts you in another prison and you end up beating your limp dick in the shower stall for 24 hours straight. Neighborhood folks said this guy Jesus was a good Christian. Christened him Jesus of Sunny Slope. He was a New Testament fanboy who strode the hood at night, armed with a Bible and a holstered sidearm, and he treated the streets and those on them as his ministry. They said he had a big heart. They said he protected them. He helped moms with coins for the laundromat and gave money to those whose food stamps were spent. They said he'd never sell to minors. To score math off of him, you had to prove that you were actually older than 18. They said he decapitated some dude once with a guitar string for raping a Sunny Slope girl. He was a dealer with a heart of gold, all right. I'd figured prison taught him rules, like how to live by fear and to rule by it. He controlled the crystal flowing in and out of Sunny Slope. That gave him emotional control. He was a neighborhood protector, so the residents owed him. He threatened real violence with guns and a quick burn fuse. He had eyes and muscles in all corners of the hood. We were meeting him because the West Side hillbillies were dry. He was never in short supply of good shit, but it had a price. You had to endure him. We needed Crank, and me and Tinkle's laugh that the route to God was through Jesus. Any other time, I'd hate his guts. This is kind of a true story, actually. This guy, Jesus, actually existed in some form.
Tinkles, too.
And this guy Tinkles, anyway, whatever. It's all fiction. Hey. Skeletal trees, chain-linked dirt yards, and cinder block box houses constructed so close together on narrow streets made the hood feel claustrophobic. More than one open door revealed a motorcycle parked in the living room and 2 loud big-screen TVs. I saw sallow faces and joyless interiors lit up in reality show colors, the hues of celebrity deifications and yearnings for easy fame and wealth. It gave the illusion of living in vibrant lights, high-def desperation fueled on meth, fantasy. Police cruiser lights brightened up the all-hour action, cops in real time. Crystal kept this entire neighborhood wired. The street grew darker the nearer we got to Jesus' place. It looked pieced together from black and white photos of decades-old crime scenes. His was last on the left on a hilltop dead end, and beyond that, a no-man's land of sharply barbed cacti and jagged rocks descending into darkness. "Dude, it's Heart of Darkness," I said. Tinkles didn't respond. He rarely did. He was a reserved dude with a lisp. A comment from him felt like an intrusion, but he was no idiot. He bailed from journalism school. In the years I'd known him, I'd never heard more than a single sentence, maybe 2, drop from his mouth at any one time. He once drunkenly confided that his lisp provided endless hours of agony, especially around girls. Tinkles flipped a bitch and parked in front of Jesus' place. He killed the motor and headlights and swallowed the last of his pint. Streetlights were shot out, but we had moonlight. I stepped out of the car and into the hot breeze, unscrewed the king, swallowed a good one, and took in Phoenix splayed out in the valley below. Darkness always calms the city's harsh edges, and the glimmering reds and ambers comforted. The malt liquor was ice cold, and I was feeling better. Jesus' house was hidden behind shit piled high in the fenced front yard. A burnt husk of a Ford Bronco was centerpieced, and heaped around it were bed springs, busted motorcycle frames, a corroded washing machine, a doorless refrigerator, a man tall plastic Santa, mangled swing set, and all sorts of junk. Weeds grew up through the chaos, and you could taste the rust on your tongue. A barricade passing itself off as some blue-collar art installation depicting a meth-damaged vision of Eden. Tinkle stepped from the car, and a raging pit bull emerged from under the junk and scared the shit out of us. We sprinted up Jesus' driveway, and I followed Tinkles around the house to a side entrance. Now, Tinkles is the only overweight tweaker I'd ever met, maybe the only one who ever existed, so his trot had me howling. I've never seen him attempt to run. He looked like one of those old Weebles toys, wobbling side to side, but with globs of jiggly flesh threatening to split his maroon work slacks and pop buttons from his shirt. Now, even he laughed. We were about to score, man, so... The side entrance was half hidden by dead vines. We ducked to avoid a smashed-up security camera dangling from a cable off its mount. We knocked, waited, knocked again, waited. Tinkles unpinned his work shirt name tag and slid it into his pant pocket. We knocked again, longer this time. Panic rose. Every cell in my body screamed for meth. I unscrewed the king and sucked. God bless the king of malt liquor. The peephole darkened. Another moment passed. We heard voices on the other side of the door. Another moment passed. Jesus fucking Christ. Then, multiple deadlocks clicked and finally the door swung open. We stepped inside and tweaker effluvia filled our faces, and I almost choked on what smelled of underarms and peeled onions and lawnmowers, and a woman stepped from behind the door and acknowledged us. She was skinny and skull-eyed and dirty blonde and pregnant, whole in faded pastels with a hump in the middle and 2 heartbeats, one of which was visible in her neck, speed thumping away. She shut the door behind us and vanished like a ghost down the dark hallway. She had no presence. She emanated nothing and left little impression. People ravaged by crystal meth are like that, like something tangible in their being. Astral planners say aura had been eaten away. You see them physically, but they're lighter in every sense of the word. A Confederate flag stretched across the ceiling, nailed up in the center and corners, backlit by the ceiling bulb. It gave off a blood-red tint of hate, and you couldn't miss Jesus. We'll stop there. Thank you very much. And thank you for Jesse for having me. Jesse Sensabar. The Book of Spent Saints. I'll gladly answer any questions if anybody has any. This is always really embarrassing.
What year in study slope is this?
That's like 1990, 2000. The book follows the trajectory of one character's life. It's not my life, per se, but it's like the middle of the book, 2000. Yes.
What's it like seeing your work on film?
It's kind of awful, actually. You know, we did this, and these film directors read the stories, and I didn't really have much to do with it, except that Maggie and I, my publicist, who's now happens to be my girlfriend now, I don't know how that worked out. I always say that the busboy always gets the waitress, They just did these because they did the films because they love them and they love the story. So that was really flattering. But I didn't really have any say, except that we wrote the scripts. We just gave them the scripts and then saw the films come back. But we loved the director's work before they did any work with our stories. I mean, it wasn't like there was a ton of money involved. I mean, somebody invested some money into the stories to do these films. So they liked the book well enough to do that. So that was really flattering.
Did somebody put the money in?
Yeah. It's funny how it validates,
We've been here, most of us have been here most Mondays to see readings, and this is the first time we've had film, music, reading. Thank you for all of that.
Oh, thank you.
And
Thank
is
you.
this typical of Ridgeway Press, or of your own kind of team of artists?
Well, we try to make it interesting because the last thing before my book came out, in fact, The guy who runs Ridgeway Press is a professor at a university in Michigan, and he had me at one of his readings. And before I even finished the book, he said, "I'm putting your book out." It was amazing. I didn't have to shop it or anything. Then I had another offer from a different reading to put from another small press. So I'm really fortunate every step of the way. I mean, there wasn't any period of rejections with this. I mean, I've been rejected plenty in my life, but the guy at Ridgeway said, "Oh, we're going to put your book out, but you're not going to sell more than 500 copies." And so the first run was like 500 copies, and we sold that in 2 days. And he was just amazed. So we've sold more of this book. I'm getting to answer your question. But we sold more of this book than Ridgeway's been around for 45 years than they've ever sold. And it's because we're actually going to cities and doing readings, and we're making sure that we have good readers with us or have music, and we're trying to make it multimedia, and we have films. And actually the films what was Maggie's idea to do the films. She's an amazing publicist, because nobody really buys books anymore, and especially a collection of short stories, which apparently my publisher's like, nobody reads short stories, nobody buys them. And I grew up reading Flannery O'Connor and a lot of great short story writers, and I'm like, no way, and so her idea was let's put films to stories, and that's what really extended the life of the book. With the 30-second films that we did, they were like trailers for each story. So we said, okay, we're gonna go to each city, and we're gonna show these films, we're gonna show these trailers, and then we're gonna show these films, and we're gonna have music at our readings, and we're gonna do these readings, and that's just how it worked out. The first readings I did in Michigan, it was all these blue hairs, man. I'm not reading about these like really drug-addled stories, and like I'm reading to a bunch of blue hairs and old ladies and stuff. And I remember my girlfriend at the time was like, "There's your audience, man. Those are the people who read." So I'm like, "Fuck that," So I think that this has really worked to do it this way. Did I even answer your question? I'm sorry. Sorry, I rambled.
How close to the character in the film are you actually?
Well, it's fiction.
So,
It's really, I've heard, it's like, this feels really narcissistic to get up and talk about your book. And it feels narcissistic to write a memoir, I think. Because I started to write a memoir. I'm like, who the fuck cares about, but one of my favorite authors said a long time ago that you arrive at a greater truth through fiction, and I always thought that that always stuck with me, and his point was fantastic, because you can't tell a straight memoir without devices that, you know what I mean, without the metaphors and without the big symbols. And so the character in the book resembles me in some ways. I mean, he's a champion bicycle racer in the book, and he's a frontman for a rock and roll band, and then he's a journalist, and I've done all those things. And a drug addict, and so I've done that too. And so I pulled from all of that. And it was really the easiest thing to do at the time, because I was really depressed and when I wrote this, and I didn't think anybody would give a shit, and nobody would want to publish it or anything. And so, to answer your question, I'm sorry. Any more questions? Thank you very much.